satu cek cek cek.
Tes cek cek. Tes cek cek tes one cek.
Cek cek satu cek. Hah?
Tes cek
Cek.
one tes.
Cek satu cek.
Cek
Ini
cek
gede banget yang ini.
tes
Yang ini gede banget.
tes cek cek.
Definitely. Thank you, Eugene. Not at all, not at all. Mas Ali. Oh, saya forward ke WA-nya Mas Ali aja ya. PowerPoint-nya Mas Jaya. Mas Ali. Iya. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Universitas Islam International Indonesia. We are very happy and excited to have all of you here to our first 2023 Southeast Asia update. I would like also to welcome our donors from the Asia Foundation and from Luminate. Welcome to our campus. To our esteemed guests, speakers, and leading scholars, welcome to UI3, Pak Greg Philly. Welcome to UI3, our lecturers, and our promising students, welcome. We're very happy to have you here. Let me give some information regarding the rundown real quick and introduce our speakers, and then we're set to go, yeah? We have today 7 leading scholars of Southeast Asia, 9 actually leading scholars of Southeast Asia. 7 are able to join us on site today. 2 will join us through Zoom later in the afternoon. For our first keynote speaker, we have our own Professor Faris Nur. Professor Nur is a political scientist and historian specializing in Southeast Asia. Currently, Mas Faris teaching here with us at UI3, but also at University Malaya. And then from Thailand, we have Dr. Punchada Sirifunabut. Welcome, Dr. Punchada. Dr. Punchada is a political scientist and expert on Thailand and currently teaching at Mahidol University in Thailand. From Malaysia, we have Dr. Koo Ying Hoi. Welcome, Dr. Koo. She's a political scientist as well, an expert on Malaysia, and currently teaching at University Malaya. Yeah, welcome, Dr. Koo. From Indonesian side, we have our own Dr. Jayadi Hanan. Mas Jay, thank you so much. Mas Jay is an expert on Indonesian politics, presidentialism, and institution in general. And Mas Jay is teaching with us here at UI3, but also at Paramadina, I believe. Welcome, Mas Jay. And welcome, Mbak Hana from Asia Foundation. Thank you so much for coming. We are very happy that you are here with us. Not at all, not at all. It's just started, yeah. And then we also have our own Dr. Amalinda Safirani. Mbak Linda, welcome to Jakarta. Mbak Linda is a political scientist, expert on Indonesia and civil society movement. Mbak Linda is currently teaching at Universitas Gadjah Mada. From the Philippines, we have Miss Maria Elise Mendoza. Welcome, Elise. Elise is also a political scientist, currently teaching at University of Philippines, Diliman. She's an expert on the Philippines. Welcome again. And then we have 2 other political scientists that will join us through Zoom. Yeah, there are Mo Tuzar, PhD candidate. Mo Tuzar is a political scientist and an expert on Myanmar. Currently, she's a senior research fellow at ICS Yusof Ishak in Singapore. And then finally, we have Ms. Sildonia Sarmento. She was trained as a political scientist at Universitas Indonesia. Currently, she's an independent consultant, has been consulting for various important firms, including the Asia Foundation. Yeah, she's an expert on Timor Leste. That's the list of speakers we have today. And without further ado, we'll start our conference by an opening remark by our own dean, Dr. Philip Vermonte. Dr. Vermonte, time is yours.
Very good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for, especially our speakers, for making your ways to coming down here to UIII. Just some kind of a advertisement about UIII, right? This is a national strategic project of President Jokowi. It was started by a presidential, some kind of a presidential decree back in 2016. But they started to build the university only about 2 years later in 2018. And because of the pandemic, the development was kind of slowing down. But now here we are. And then we started to accept students starting in 2021. So welcome to this humble new university. I appreciate that you accept our invitation. Maybe some of you not knowing what it is. We are relying on personal network of Gede and others at the faculty, and we've been some of you have been knowing each other for quite a long time through circuits of networks of scholars in Southeast Asia. In my previous life, I was with CSIS, and I spent some seminars with you, and so on. And secondly, I'd like to thank as well Professor Faris Noor of University Malaya. Soon will be with us. He will be teaching at the UIII, already teaching this semester, but physically fully next semester, Prof. Faris will join us. And also, I'd like to thank the generous support we receive for the Asia Foundation and Luminate. Thank you, Mbak Hana and Mbak Dinita. I hope that this will be continuing to support our little Faculty of Social Sciences. And a little bit about this idea, I actually copied, we actually copied from ANU, from Pak Greg Philly's Indonesia update. I remember back in the 2013 when I was invited to speak right before the Indonesian 2014 election to the Indonesia update. And in the introductory remark by Professor Andrew McIntyre, and he's now president of Monash University in Jakarta, and he was saying, I think that 2013 Indonesia update was the 30th of Indonesia update series, and he said he couldn't believe that it was a huge crowd at that time, maybe because that was about right before the Indonesian presidential election. And people was excited with candidate President Jokowi at that time. It's no joke. But then Andrew was saying, we started 30 years ago only with 12 people gathered around a small round table. And then it slowly developed into some kind of a scholarly platform for those who are studying Indonesia, because that was Indonesia update, and scholars coming then from all over Australia and from Indonesia as well. So we discussed about this at this university. Let's do something, but let's focus on Southeast Asia and start with a small session like this. So it is designed to be a small gathering of friends, of scholars who are interested in Southeast Asia. And for this first, of course, we chose this topic timely. Some of the countries already did their election: Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Singapore will soon be having one. Indonesia also, and Myanmar. And I think thinking about the region, we could not imagine 10 years ago that up until few months ago, we had two military junta in the region. That was something incredible given what has been developing since 1998. But the Thai people kicked out the military junta through electoral means a few months ago. Now we have one last standing military junta in the region, but there are a lot of questions, and I think we have to think about what are the similarities and what would be the trajectory of our region, because in my view, we've been progressing so much, especially Indonesia, in terms of political development since 1998, but we see some regression, of course. Australian friends, scholars at the ANU have been writing a lot about democratic regression in Indonesia. As an Indonesian, until last year or a few months ago, I was kind of not accepting that fact. Being an Indonesian, I want to see Indonesia democracy to continue to be strong and so on, but right now we have time to rethink about what would be our future trajectory. And I think Pak Jayadi Hanan has been preparing his speech with some, I don't know, we'll see later what he will be saying. But we look forward to hearing from you, from the region, experts on Southeast Asia, what is the development in your respective country. And to our Asia Foundation friend and Illuminate, thank you. It will be an annual event. Hopefully you will continue supporting us, and we can have a different type of issues next year and the years after and for many years to come, depending on what would be the most relevant issue of the day during that particular year. And with your help, I think it will be done. And I'd like to thank our hardworking team, Dr. Gede Dwitya. Thank you for arranging this. And also our hardworking team as well at the back, Rida, Maulida, and so on. And of course, our students, this is the time as well to learn from the expert on Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Dekan. I'd like to apologize first. I forgot my friend Dr. Eugene Tan here. Welcome, Eugene, to Singapore. Indonesia. See, I'm very nervous because I overlooked Dr. Eugene Tan. Dr. Eugene Tan is a legal scholar, but also political scientist, comparative politics for your master's, yeah. And he is currently teaching at Singapore Management University, yeah. I was personally so afraid I couldn't find a Singapore expert. Before I remember, I met Eugene previously at Christchurch, Oxford, yeah, and at a conference, yeah. Thank you so much. During your very hectic schedule, welcome to Indonesia again. And without further ado, Mas Faris, time is yours. You will be the first speaker, and then we have 3 more speakers for the first morning session. Would you like to speak at the...
I will speak here. Can I?
Here? Okay, sure.
Testing. Thank you very much, good day. I'd like to begin by, of course, thanking the organizers of this event. Thanks to Philips, good day, all my friends here at UIII. Some people have said that if you want to have a happy party, the last thing you should do is invite a historian. Because then the party starts off on a rather depressing note and it only gets worse from that point onwards. So I'm here ostensibly for the purpose of delivering a keynote, but I informed the organizers that I'd like to give a kind of broad historical overview for us to be able to locate our discussions in the context of a longer, broader history seen from the point of longue durée. Much of what I will start with, I think should be familiar to most of us here, those of us who are working in Southeast Asia and working on Southeast Asia. It can be summed up in a very simple operational thesis, namely the idea that democracy, or rather democratic praxis in Southeast Asia, is still very much in its infancy. It's a very new and novel idea. But I'm wary when we start discussions like that, especially when we focus our discussion on regions in particular, because there's always this tendency to over-particularize and to somehow indirectly imply particularities or uniqueness to the place or the thing that we are talking about. Nothing that I'm going to say is exclusive to Southeast Asia. Nor is any of this unique to Southeast Asia. But since we are talking about the state of elections and democracy in Southeast Asia, allow me to work within these parameters. I don't think we can have a discussion about the state of democracy in Southeast Asia today without locating Southeast Asia on some kind of historical map. And for this, of course, we need to begin with the genesis of this region itself. The very idea of Southeast Asia, of course, is a construct and it's a completely artificial idea. But let's play along with that, assuming that there is such a thing as Southeast Asia and that there are things as Southeast Asian communities or nations. We have to go back to the genesis of this region and the polities that have now evolved to become the nation states that we recognize. And we need to locate this discussion. We need to begin the discussion with some understanding of the state of society and politics in the pre-modern, pre-colonial era. Now, those of you who are historians of Southeast Asia, will obviously be aware of this, right? Let's be blunt and explicit here. In the pre-modern, pre-colonial period, we had polities, we had kingdoms in Southeast Asia. And again, there's nothing terribly unique about this. This was the state of politics the world over. Politics itself, the very term, if you understand politics in terms of the political, in terms of contestation between actors and agents in a public domain, did not exist, both in the West and in the East. Up to the 14th century, we are talking about kingdoms the world over, where basically you are the subject of your ruler. Citizenship as an idea had not evolved to what we know it to be today. And there was no such thing as a public domain. So we start with that. Yeah, we start with the fact that as far as recorded history is concerned, what we know about this particular part of the world is that there was nothing resembling an independent, autonomous public domain up to the 14th century of Southeast Asia. Yes, of course, there were communities, there were functional groups within these communities. Society was internally differentiated in terms of professions and vocations and what have you, but by and large, the pattern of governance across Southeast Asia, as in the rest of Asia, Africa, and the Western world as well, was modeled on the kingdom. And the kingdom then, both in Europe and in Asia, was something that required a discourse of legitimacy, and that discourse of legitimacy came from religion. The idea of divine right of rule, divine kingship. This is something that we get from the myth of King Arthur in England all the way to the Devarajas of Southeast Asia. And so we see from the outset, I think there will be discussions afterwards about, the re-entry, the alleged re-entry of religious symbols and vocabularies into the domain of politics. I've always argued that, this is not something novel or new. This was the norm of politics across the world up till the Age of Enlightenment. This is only interrupted by something that happens in the Western world, which has an impact on the rest of the world as well, including, of course, Europe. And that is the birth of modernity. And modernity, of course, manifests itself in all kinds of ways, from the scientific revolution, which leads to the industrial revolution and what have you. But in particular, something hugely important happens in Europe at the beginning of the 17th century, and we still live in the shadow of that, and that is the birth of modern colonial capitalism. It emerges when the kingdoms of Europe are in contestation with one another over hegemony and dominance in the European continent, and in the process of doing so, there emerges a mercantile class that eventually pools capital, and this leads to the formation of things like the Dutch East Indies Company and the British East India Company in the centuries that follow, followed up by the French Compagnie des Indes, the Spanish Compañía de las Indias Orientales. And what we really see here is, I think, the beginnings of a public domain. The emergence of economic actors that eventually will assume, political agency and capacity to act as well. The birth of modern colonial capitalism, the birth of modern capitalism as we know it, contributes to the already slow process of internal fragmentation within European society. It leads to the emergence of clusters of different professional groups. All of this would set the stage for the emergence of an independent middle class. And as we know, anyone who's familiar with the history of Europe will know that all of these happen to be the variable factors that contribute to things like the French Revolution much later on. In other words, divine kingship gets challenged from within. Simon Sharma's book, Citizens Chronicle of the French Revolution, is a very good start into this topic. Now, why is this important to us? It's important to us here in Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia and Africa as well, because colonial capitalism sets into motion the process of modern empire building. And I don't think we can talk about democracy in Southeast Asia without having a discussion about the legacy of empire and the legacy of colonialism. And here we need to distinguish between the early forms of colonial contact, say when the Spanish and the Portuguese arrived to Southeast Asia. We need to compare that to the later forms of colonial engagement when the British and the Dutch and later the French and Americans arrive in Southeast Asia from the 18th and 19th centuries onwards, because they bring with them a completely different logic. And it's a logic that's driven by the idea that colonies are no longer about proselytization, no longer about turning Asia into Europe, but rather colonies are business ventures. And the purpose of modern colonies is profit making. What I find interesting about the history of Southeast Asia is how this long episode of the 19th century is so rarely discussed in terms of economic history and material history in our part of the world. Those of us who are familiar with the official historiography of Southeast Asia will know that when you read the official history textbooks of Southeast Asia, inevitably, the whole period of colonial rule is often amalgamated into one long episode, which technically is not correct, because there are actually differentiations between 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th century colonialism. But secondly, the transformative effect of modern colonial capitalism on Southeast Asia is often not taken into account, and I think given due attention. Instead, what we have is a tendency to write about this colonial encounter in terms of conflict, in terms of contestation, and of course, all of this is spilled into the domain of popular media, literature, films these days, and those of us who live in Southeast Asia are more than familiar with the wave of nationalist historiography that comes in cinematic form, movies about battles and wars and heroes, fighting foreign colonial rule and what have you. Yes, of course, it can't be denied that the opening stages of colonial conquest did indeed involve violence, confrontation, conflict. But I think what's unique, what's interesting about late colonial capitalism is that it requires peace. Above all, it requires peace. Why? Because you can't run a profitable colony if there is a state of perpetual violence. And I think this is the one aspect of late colonial capitalism that is not taken into account even by historians in this part of the world. My argument here is a simple one. Modern colonial capitalism is built on the basis of a contractual society. It's very Lockean. It requires a contractual society, and for there to be a contractual society, there has to be consensus and agreement, and above all, there has to be cooperation and collaboration. So in other words, the genius, if you like, of late modern colonialism is that it offers you a buy-in. Colonialism only works when the colonized buy into their own colonization. And this is the interesting thing about the kind of contractual society that we see being created from South Asia to Southeast Asia from the 18th to 19th century. It is, I think, a truism to state that a few thousand Dutchmen could not have controlled Indonesia because they're not 50 feet tall, they're human beings like us. A few thousand Englishmen could not have controlled the whole of India because they're not 50 feet tall either, they're humans like us. How does this work? It only works if you can persuade the colonized to be part of their own colonization. And that works through a contractual society. And I think here, with the emergence of a contractual society in Southeast Asia, we begin to see something really interesting and something which is very recognizable to us today. We begin to see how modern colonization introduces opportunity structures. It opens up pathways and avenues that allows for colonized societies or members of colonized societies to actually be part of the colonial enterprises, and it offers, in turn, rewards, particularly in terms of opportunities for social advancement, social integration, social visibility. It also offers, upward social mobility, and all of us here, are familiar with this. In the 19th century, for example, to serve as a postman in British Malaya or British Burma or British India or the Dutch East Indies was a big thing, because you're now part of that colonial state apparatus. You get a badge, you get a uniform, you even get a bicycle. I mean, literal, symbols of social status and social mobility. And that's how empires work, After the fighting and the shooting, after the killing and the dying, follows decades of institution building. Now, there are some who have claimed that through this process of imperial outreach, reaching into the tendrils and sinews of colonized societies, colonization also introduced the foundations of what would later become democratic praxis, primarily through politics of representation. And we see this particularly from the late 19th century to earlier 20th century. We begin to see almost as if it occurs like an afterthought for some of these empires that you actually need to actually bring the natives into the process of colonial governance. I think let's be clear about this. Colonies were never democracies. Colonies have never been democracies. They are not democracies. They are not meant to be democracies. To some extent, yes, there were, in some instances, certainly not all, opportunities for limited representation, where representatives of certain communities, often landed class interests, were allowed to be part of the process of colonial administration. But again, I emphasize that, this is limited representation. We see things like, native representative councils being set up in India, in Malaya and Burma, Indonesia, what have you. But this is limited representation. And I think what's interesting about the kinds of limited political representation we see from the late 19th century to early 20th century is that often in the context of colonies that are, again, I emphasize, fundamentally profit-making ventures. Yeah? Whatever limited representation there was often couched in terms of identity politics or communal politics. In other words, it's communal representation on the basis of identity. And this is where we talk about, colonial multiculturalism, which frankly, in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, for me, colonial multiculturalism is basically colonial multiracism, because it's built upon the politics of divide and rule. Now, it's upon that basis, the modern colony, which is how modernity arrives to Southeast Asia, where we begin to see all the modalities of modern governance, things that we are familiar with today: public administration, centralized command, regulation, policing, even the tools of statecraft that all states of Southeast Asia use today. The census, for example, it's a relic from the colonial period. Why was the census introduced? It's introduced simply for you to count your natives and to be able to divide your natives. Group A, Group B, the brown ones, the yellow ones, the black ones, or what have you. That's what the census is for. And today, these tools remain part and parcel of the toolbox that modern nation states have. And so, uncomfortable though this may seem to some of us, and some people really balk at this idea, I think we cannot escape the fact that the post-colonial state is built on the foundations of the colony. Any cursory examination of the map of Southeast Asia today will point to the fact that the map of Southeast Asia, the Southeast Asia that we know today, is a colonial construct. The borders of Southeast Asia were not decided by Southeast Asians. They were decided in Paris, The Hague, London, places like that. And we've inherited this. And as we have inherited, this colonial legacy, then that colonial legacy becomes part of our living present, which brings us closer to our present day times and what we want to talk about. If we can agree on these premises, one, the idea that in the pre-colonial period, there was nothing that resembled, democracy as we know it today. And again, I emphasize, this is not unique to Southeast Asia. This was equally true of the Western world. And if we accept the idea that the colonial state was not a democratic institution, it never had any intention or any pretenses to being democratic, but it did introduce the modalities of governance as we know it, then we need to ask ourselves, well, when did democracy begin to arrive in Southeast Asia? Well, it comes as an afterthought. And I think this is one of the, if you like, the hypocrisies of empire, that from the 40s to the 50s, in the rush that accompanied the process of decolonization, lo and behold, suddenly, all over Asia and Africa, we begin to see the sudden emergence of political parties and organizations and movements, and we begin to see the hurried organization of election processes all over Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia as well. It almost comes like an afterthought. It reminds me always of the elections in Hong Kong just before it gets passed on to China. You could have had elections much earlier, not one day before. And when we look at Southeast Asia, we see that. We see precisely that happening. And again, it's not unique to Southeast Asia. The belated process where democracy is finally allowed, to assume, the form of something that resembles a working democracy comes very late in our history, just at the beginning of the genesis of the modern post-colonial nation state. And so if this be the case, we need to ask ourselves, can you have democratic praxis without there being a democratic culture in the first place? When did a democratic culture ever really take root and become normalized in Southeast Asia or in many parts of Asia and Africa? When did that happen? It's almost as if you present a car to someone who has only learned to drive 30 minutes before and said, okay, now please, win the F1 for me. How is that about to happen? How can that happen? When we look at the struggle towards independence in our part of the world, in Southeast Asia and South Asia, we see only by the end of the 19th century, the closing decades of the 19th century and the beginnings of the 20th century, the emergence of modern political parties that begin to organize themselves as political entities. And this, of course, is done in emulation of, organizations and structures and institutions that are modeled upon what already exists in the West. We can't get out of this. This is the trap, if you like, of the whole anti-colonial struggle. It raises a deep existential question: how do you fight something and not become what you hate? And all colonial struggles, anti-colonial struggles, by virtue of being directed towards the objective of state capture, they do two things. One, they make the state the goal. And two, in order to capture the state, the only tools at hand are the tools that the state provides you. Tony Milner, in his book, The Invention of Politics in British Malaya, does an excellent job of analyzing this, about how the birth of modern politics in British Malaya really is shaped by the legacy of empire in Malaysia itself. You can't escape empire that easily. Yeah. So what we begin to see across Southeast Asia is the emergence of all these very young parties led by idealistic nationalists, anti-colonialists whose aim is to capture the state, but the state that is to be captured is a colony. And having won that state, which is what happens in many parts of Asia and Africa, having won that state, the tool you have now, whether you like it or not, was manufactured from the mold of the colony. And it already has in its arsenal all the tools and as well as the inclinations and proclivities of a colonizing state. And that's why when you look at the post-colonial states in Asia and Africa, what do we see? So many post-colonial states, for instance, have given incredible prominence and presence and importance to certain aspects of the state apparatus, the police, the army, state security forces. And why? Because that's what the colonial state is about. The colony is a police state because the purpose of the colony is to police the colonized. The post-colonial states that emerge afterwards, very rarely get to radically change the nature of the machine that they now have gained possession of. Fanon writes about this, in Black Skins, White Masks. The dilemma faced by post-colonial elites who, having gained control of what was a colony, are now trying to turn it into a modern state with the workings, a semblance of democracy, find themselves limited because the tool they've inherited already has these inbuilt biases built into them. And apart from the prominence given to the state security apparatus, which we see in so many post-colonial societies, the very mode of development itself, when we in Southeast Asia proudly proclaim, all our developmental goals and successes, we have to remember that the very notion of development that we have in Southeast Asia is one that we also inherited from the era of colonial capitalism. It's capital-driven development. We talk, of course, in Southeast Asia a lot about Asian values, our traditions, our cultures, and all that, but I don't see that much tradition or culture or traditional respect for the environment in Southeast Asia today. I see a lot of forests actually being leveled for palm oil. In fact, I don't see many Asian values at work there. But that's because our mode of development itself is something that we've inherited, and we've been immediately plugged into that. All of Southeast Asia, all the states of Southeast Asia, upon independence, were immediately thrust onto the stage of international global politics where the rules were already set, and from the 50s onwards, immediately dragged into the logic of the Cold War, like it or not. So, if that's the background that has led us to where we are today, since today we are talking about elections, how do we understand politics, political parties, and democratic processes and democratic praxis in Southeast Asia? I don't know whether we have the right vocabulary to describe what we have in Southeast Asia. It looks as if we have the workings of democracy. It looks, yeah. We certainly have parties, we have a lot of flags, we have a lot of free t-shirts, especially during elections. I mean, as someone who's followed elections in Southeast Asia very closely, I'm struck by the fact that a virtual political economy of elections and electioneering has emerged. Elections are actually a fun time, It's pesta. It's free t-shirt time. It's not even free t-shirt time. It's free brass time. It's free kopi time. It's free gula time. elections are amazing, and it's not unique to any particular country. We see this across Southeast Asia. I remember once following elections here in Indonesia with my friend who was a beca driver. We went from one party rally to another, and at the end of it, he was very happy. He said, Mas Farish, I've got enough T-shirts for 5 years now. And this is not again unique to Indonesia. Yeah, it happens across Southeast Asia. We have that. The other thing that we see is the way in which politics, political praxis, and political organs and tools, parties, may indeed serve ideological ends, but more often than not, political parties are vehicles that provide precisely the same kind of social mobility and social presence and social standing and status that the structures of the colonial state used to do in the past. Why do people join parties in Southeast Asia, particularly in the context of our region today, where, to be blunt, I think the level of political awareness, the understanding of ideology is very low. I've seen in some parts of Southeast Asia, even people joining several parties at the same time, very proudly opening their wallets and showing me 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different party cards. And this for me is astounding. Now, the reason why I'm cautious when I talk about this, is because I do not, again, want to particularize Southeast Asia as a Southeast Asianist. I loathe the tendency to over-exoticize Southeast Asia and to somehow present Southeast Asia as a kind of freak cases, which it's not. The point I'm trying to make here is, since today we're going to be talking about election processes and democratic praxis in Southeast Asia, I think Southeast Asia's still young, fledgling culture of democracy deserves close attention and study. It is not something that I think can or should be studied solely by those who work in political science or political theory, but I think it's a field that is ripe and fertile for anthropologists, sociologists, political economists to actually study the many manifestations of political culture and praxis that we have in Southeast Asia today. And in the process of doing so, I know that today we'll be talking about political culture in Southeast Asia and political praxis in Southeast Asia. The only cautionary remark I would like to make at this point is that while all these discussions are hugely relevant and important, and very timely, of course, because we are in election season. But we're always in election season anyway in Southeast Asia. Because while we're in election season in Southeast Asia, I think it's important to locate all of this happening in the context of the globalized world that we live in today. For me, Southeast Asia's political culture and democratic praxis is something that goes beyond the stated aims of elections itself. I think many things are happening when we have elections. I think we are seeing contestations between groups, cultures, as politics and political parties become vehicles and tools to forward communitarian goals, communal goals, and basically, in the age of identity politics, this is no longer unique to Southeast Asia. I began just now talking about, the non-politics or the unpolitics of the pre-colonial, pre-modern past, where basically we had divine kingship, the era of the Deva Raja. Well, if you look at politics, global politics today, there are plenty of Deva Rajas around as well. And they've brought to politics this culture of personalized kingship, personalized leadership. And I know one Deva Raja I'm thinking of is Donald Trump, who in so many ways is almost symptomatic of the kind of transactional politics that we see today. So the reason why things like the rise of transactional politics in America or the rise of identity politics in Europe today is, I think, hugely relevant for us in Southeast Asia is that it allows us, it reminds us of the need for us to actually place our discussions in a broader global context. Living as we do in the age where Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, dictate political opinions and lay down political truths to which people react to, I think locating Southeast Asia in this context of broader history is going to be hugely important for our discussions today. So going back to the question that I raised early on, how old, how deep and how meaningful is the democratic culture that we have in Southeast Asia today? I think we've seen spurts where there were indeed genuine attempts to articulate a language and vocabulary of politics that actually was democratic in nature. We've seen this in the mid-70s in Thailand, for example. We saw this in Indonesia post-98. And we've seen this in many other parts of Southeast Asia. But all of this is against a tide of a longer history that's always there in the background. It's always there in the background. And that long history, and this is why I think, like I said earlier, historians are boring because we remind you of this baggage. We all carry this baggage. And our region has a lot of baggage. That baggage means that whether we like it or not, whether we want to accept it or not, notwithstanding all our efforts at political and ideological education, trying to improve political literacy and economic literacy in Southeast Asia, we have to remember that our people, our populations in Southeast Asia live in a world where this long historical baggage brings with it a huge vocabulary that constantly informs the way they look at the world, understand the world, and understand the political process. Now, it's against that backdrop that I think an assessment, a continuous assessment of the state of democracy and democratic praxis in Southeast Asia is necessary, which is why events like this is important. Of course, our gathering today cannot lead us to any final conclusion because democracy is a work in process, but so is Southeast Asia, which is a constant work in process. But from a historian's point of view, at least, depressing though some of these observations may be, some might talk about backsliding, some might talk about regression, but from a historian's point of view, none of this is new. None of this is new. We should not be surprised by the currents and trends that we are seeing in Southeast Asia today. And perhaps that's the only advantage I have here as a historian, that I don't have to make a judgment and I don't have to make a final call, because the role of the historian is just to sit in the background, watch the disaster, document it, and let other people feel depressed about it later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mas Faris. It's a very enlightening keynote speech. Yeah, we have to understand current Southeast Asia political development against the backdrop of legacies from the past. Yeah, pre-colonial political cultures and the legacies of colonial capitalism. Some of the notes I took from Mas Faris' talk. Yeah, colonies were never meant to be democracies. Yeah, at best limited representation. It was mainly profit-making ventures. The culture of Dewa Raja, personalized politics, yeah. So it was never, and maybe it is still never, a fertile ground for liberal democracies, yeah. Thank you so much, Mas Faris. This is a great overview of the region in general, and I think it's time for us to zoom in now to country specifics. We have 3 countries, presentation from Dr. Punchada first, and then we have Dr. Kuyung Hui afterward, and then finally our own Dr. Jaya Dihananya. It is followed by Q&A afterward. I think this is a very relaxed conference. If any of you feels like asking an immediate question, do feel free to ask question. Yeah. I think time for Punchada. Please, you want to go?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's really nice to come back to Indonesia once again after a long COVID. I was actually considered as an Indonesian expert for the Thai government as well. I have been conducting a research here every year by the Thai budget, but this time I'm going to be a Thai expert for Indonesians here. Well, before I go into my talk, may I introduce my new books, which is I have couples here on the party finance in Thailand, funded by Idea International. So if you are interested, I have a couple left. Then it was launched just last month about how political parties and Thai state fund political party during the campaigns and the developments of political parties. Well, my talk today is going to be about the past election in May of Thailand. In this election, there's a lot of interesting and challenging for the politics of Thailand. The outcome was really surprised all peoples in Thailand, not even the military themselves, but also I think all the voters in Thailand. Maybe you guys heard about the young generation in Thailand has formed new political party, so-called Future Forward, but it was dissolved by the Constitutional Court and it was reformed to the Move Forward Party, led by Pita Limjaroenrat as the party leader. This time, Move Forward Party, won a large number of seats and even beat Pheu Thai party. Pheu Thai is the pro-Thaksin party, and it's the first time in Thai political history that Thaksin lost the election. Well, the second one is the competing among faction in Thailand. Last month, I was advised the dissertation in Indonesia on the factions in Indonesian politics. I thought, at first, I thought the term faction in Indonesia is similar to faction in Thailand, but it's actually not. For Thailand, faction refer to a group of people who are formed outside the parliament, and they form together a political party and they run in the election. But in Indonesian, it seems to be the faction is a group of the people forming after the election within the parliament, which is really interesting for my own knowledge. And this time, faction in Thailand lost. Most of them lost the election. In the past, faction that controlled it by most of the powerful figure or mafia in all provinces around the country, they always win the elections. But this time they lost for Pheu Thai party. For the Move Forward Party. And the other interesting point is the split of the government, the last government. Actually, Philip mentions that Thailand kicked the military out of the politics in this election. It's actually not, because the military transformed itself to be together with the pro-Thaksin party, Pheu Thai party, to form the coalition government. Well, that's really complicated. I will talk about this later, but military still survive. They are with the coalition government. And the other one is the competition between party in the democratic side. I think it's really interesting, in here, from my own understanding, that political party can be divided into two groups, like Islam and secular, right? And they use Islamic idea to build and mobilize the party in Indonesia. But in Thailand, we have democratic side and the royalist side. Maybe you heard about the red shirt and yellow shirt before, but this time in this election, it turned to be democratic side and the loyalist side. So the loyalist side or conservative side refer to the military political parties, and the democratic side refer to the Pheu Thai party, basically, and also the Move Forward Party. There's a fighting this time. We're supposed to see the fighting between the conservative side and democratic side in this election, but it's actually not. It's competitions among the political party in democratic side, which is the Move Forward Party and Pheu Thai party, the pro-Thaksin party. Well, another interesting point is we have, as Farid mentioned, we have a long history of political party, so-called Democrat parties of Thailand. Democrats always represent the conservative side, and they always, compete with Pheu Thai party. In this election, it seems that Democrat is gonna be gone in Thai elections. And now the Democratic Party sort of fighting within the party itself. Now they don't even have the party leader because they're fighting among the faction within the parties. And a lot of analysis in Thai politics said that it may be the time of the Democrat Party to be get rid out, or maybe they might be gone from Thai politics in the next election as well. But I think it's really interesting issues. And the last one is the competitions in cyber. In other past election, the faction was really, political faction were really important because they have their own vote canvasser. They do the vote buying system. They control all that provinces. But in this election, the Move Forward Party, for the first time, they use social media, very strong social media in every platform in order to get into the voters. So then that's why all the messages, in Thailand, most of the young generation, they don't really read newspaper or watch TV anymore. They look all information from TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. So then that's why, all the information from the Move Forward Party can get into the hand of the voters, not only the young generations, but the old people. In Thailand, most of the young generation, they use TikTok, right? But the old generation, the senior generation who are older than 50, they use Line applications. So if you want to win the heart of the old generation, you have to communicate through Line application. But for the young generation, you go for TikTok, something like this. And Move Forward did it. Well, this is the result of the past election in May. Pita, number one, he's the leader of the Move Forward Party, handsome young guy, graduated from Harvard University. And he was famous among the young generations. They got number one. Number two is the Pin Thong Tha, Pae Thong Tha Shinawat. She's the daughter of Thaksin Shinawat. So she recently she was not the head of the Pheu Thai party, but the news just released this morning that next week Pheu Thai party will nominate Thaksin's daughter as the party leader to run in the next election. The third one is the Phum Chai Thai party in the middle band, and the two guys on your left is on your right is the two military guys that ran the election and won a large number of seats in past election. But this time, because of their fighting, the conflict within the military, they split political party from Palang Pracharat on number 4, and the General Prayut Chan-o-cha, the former prime minister, formed his own political party, United Thai Nation. So then that's why the votes among this conservative side split into two political parties, and then they cannot form the government. If they stick together, they will have more chance to win this election, but because of the conflict in this election. Well, let's look a little bit about the voting result of the Move Forward Party. This is the result. In Thailand, we use a two-ballot system, the district system, and also the party list system. So this is the result from the party list system. You can see is that Move Forward Party, or the Young Generation Party, won a large number of seats in the central of Bangkok and also the big city, for example, like Phuket. You can see from this one. Move Forward Party in Phuket on the orange color. They win all seats in Phuket, Chiang Mai, Mae Hong Son, Chiang Rai, Khon Kaen, the big city of Thailand, and also they won 32 out of 33 seats in Bangkok, which is really interesting because before the election, everyone thought that Pheu Thai would win a large number of seats in Bangkok, but Pheu Thai got only one seat. In the last election, the Conservative Party, Palang Pracharat, the pro-military political party, they won most of the seats in Bangkok, but this time they all go to Move Forward Party. Well, Move Forward has a policy toward the military. They want, to have the reform of the military in Thailand. They also initiate a lot of policy, trying to lower, trying to lower the power of the military in Thai politics. The surprising thing is in Bangkok, if you go to Bangkok, there's a military zone, which is center of Bangkok, right? Normally in that military zone, for example, the Palette zone, that there's just a lot of military residents. In that area, the military or the pro-conservative sides always win the seats. But in this election, all district, even the district that belong to the military, move forward, win the seat. This is really surprising. This is a policy of the Move Forward Party that trying to reform all the military. I would say this is the first time that political party initiate the policy to reform the military, and I think they're brave enough to announce this because in the past most of the political party trying to be away from the policy that related to the military reform. Well, let me talk a little bit about the district that lost in Thailand. This district controlled by the big house. Big house, I mean the factions that have their own resources and that control provinces. Well, in Thailand, when any family control the local government, they always has a network. They create their own vote canvasser. So they always win the election at the national level as well. So then that's why, when political party when anyone want to form a new political party, they always look for the big house in any provinces, get together, and then, become political party to run in the election. But Move Forward is another story. They never look for any powerful family in the province. They make their own political party from the ground. So basically, most of the members of the Move Forward, they are the Grab rider, they are the hair, salon hair, or there's many kinds of people that you're not supposed to be rich to run in politics in Thailand with the Move Forward. But in the past, it's not like this. If you want to win the election in Thailand, you have to belong to a big family, or maybe you have to be rich enough to pay for the vote canvasser and the money politics that has been using in Thai politics. But in this time, not. Well, this is an example of some provinces. Ratanaset family control Nakhon Ratchasima, which is about 3 hours from Bangkok, for a very long time. This time, this family lost all seat to the Move Forward. Asawahem family is a really big family in Thailand, control Chonburi or Pattaya province. They lost, and Samut Prakan province, they lost all seats for the Move Forward. And Kun Prüm family control, the Pattaya and Chonburi province as well, and they lost all seats for the Move Forward. And I also, show the number of seats, number of votes that these two families get. You can see for the first one, Move Forward Party, and the second one, Pheu Thai Party, that, ran by another powerful family. The score is really different, and it's a big difference. Not only like slim different, but it's a big difference between the candidate from the Move Forward and also the second runner-up. It's a Pheu Thai Party that's mostly controlled by the big family in Thailand. Another province that maybe you heard about it because that's a nice beach, Rayong province, that's close to Hua Hin in Thailand. Close to Pattaya in Thailand. Pitu Techa family from the Democrat has been controlled this province for 3 decades. This is the first time that Pitu Techa lost all seats, and there's a by-election there's a re-election in this province as well. Move Forward still won the seat in this province. So Pitu Techa family was also the member of the cabinet in the last administration as well, but they cannot use any power to make sure that their family will secure seat in this province. Nonthaburi province is a suburb of Bangkok, and it's a big city as well. Move Forward won all seats. Well, some family lost a couple seats, but not all. But Chiang Mai province has been controlled by Thaksin family for a very long time. And even in the local election, Thaksin family also won all the seats in the local election. This time, some of the seat was taken by the Move Forward as well. And also Lampang and Chiang Rai in the north also Move Forward control all this and win the seat. Well, I have to tell you this, for the Move Forward, you know, the way they do campaign, they don't really knock on the door trying to represent themselves in public like Pheu Thai and other political party did. In the election, as I mentioned, they only send the message and you know, all the content through the social media, and then they can win all the seat. You know, a lot of political party trying to do the same thing as the Move Forward. I have a chance to interview a lot of former generals and the military, asking them, why don't you guys use the social network in order to get into the people and voters and deliver your information? I got a really surprise answer. They told me that we don't have content. And I was like, do we need to have a content to do social network? And they still said, no, we don't have content. I told them that you just take a picture and say something. And they said, no, there's no content in that picture. This is the way that things, you know. And now Palang Pracharat Party trying to improve their social media in order to get into people. They have set up their own media team. But again, the way they do it's not really, I don't think it's going to be successful, because to using the network and social network, it's not about the candidates themselves. It's about the people who receive your message, right? If you were a candidate and you're trying to make a content all the time, but you don't have a fan club, your message is going to stuck in your TikTok forever. It's not going to be out, you know, for the whole country. But Move Forward, they have fandom. Do you know fandom? Fandom, they have a big fandom. So then, you know, it's not only a fan club, but it's a kingdom of fan club. So then that's why Move Forward can use social network to access all the people. I interviewed a couple of people from Move Forward. They said they spend only about 140 million baht for the social network. But on the other hand, when I talk to other military political party, how much you spend for the campaign in last election, they said it's about 10,000 million baht. You see the difference? 10,000, which is a lot. Yeah. Okay, and this is another province in Isan. For the survival of the big house, there are also some, you know, in on the yellow side. Phum Chai Thai, the first one, Nevin faction party, Nevin party. Nevin faction family is the powerful politicians group of family in Thailand as well. And this is the only province that can, the big family can control the numbers of seats in this election. Well, this is other. I want to show something that I think is really interesting. In Thailand, we have two ballots, as I mentioned earlier. For the district ballot, Move Forward gains a lot of seats. But in some provinces that the big house can control their own seats, they can also get some seats in the district system. But if you look at the party list system, the party list ballot, only the Move Forward and Pheu Thai party, mostly the Move Forward, are in all provinces and districts in Thailand. So even the voters, you know, they cast their ballot for the district, for their own family, powerful family factions, but in the party list, they cast the ballot for Move Forward or Pheu Thai. So there were the splitting of votes, you know, in this election between the two ballots. And some people, they are respect that family in their province, they give their vote for them. But for the party list, they give to Move Forward. This is a big, interesting in Thailand. And if you look in the detail of the score of the party list of Move Forward and Pheu Thai and Move Forward, you can see the big difference in the score for the number one in party list for that province and the number two. A big difference. Well, some factions, before the election, they want to survive. So the way they do is they move to other political parties. In Thailand, moving or switching party is normal. You can move party whenever you like. And the Constitutional Court trying to issue a law just to make sure that factions and members will stick with the political party, but in practice, most of the politicians trying to find some gap and move around. In the next election, you will see a big move among the big family and faction as well. And also in the move forward itself, most of the politicians that they don't really get any promotion, any seat or any position in the parliament, they also consider to move. So in Thailand, moving it's just normal, and this is not a good thing, but if you don't move, you're not going to survive in the election. For that last election, a lot of those, as you can see, those 4 guys, they're always the minister. So I interviewed one of them, whether they're gonna move political parties because they used to be with the pro-military political parties in the 2019. And 2023, they moved to the Democratic side, so switch side. I asked him, are you gonna move to the new political parties in this election in 2023? He said that, I only stay with the winner. So that's the answer, that he's going to split and switch to other political parties. If this faction move, so then they have a chance, and most of them that move to the new political party, they won the seat and won the election and become the minister in this cabinet. Well, this is about elections, but let me discuss a little bit about how to vote the prime minister in Thailand. Really, really interesting. I was actually in the constitutional drafter committee during the military. I actually trying to defend this a lot about, you let the Senate to vote for the prime minister, but, it's really difficult as a scholar. You're not be able to fight all the military guys in the committees. Well, in Thailand, even though you win the election, it doesn't mean that you can be the prime minister. It depends on how both house, upper and lower house, vote for the prime minister. In this time, for the Senate, there's about 250 votes. And for the upper house, for the lower house, it's about 500. To become the prime minister, you have to get 376 votes. So Pitha nominate himself, Pitha and Move Forward Party nominate Pitha to be a prime minister. But Pitha could not really secure vote from the Senate, because most of the Senate were selected by the military back about 2019. So then when they have the power to vote for the prime minister, as you can see from the number, only about 13 senators from 250 vote for Pitha to become the prime minister. And the rest, no. They said that because Move Forward Party trying to amend the 112 article, which is related to the lay majesty law, and most of the senators, they just not agree with that. So then that's why they don't want to vote for Pitha and Move Forward to become the prime minister. Move Forward have a high confidence that they believe that the senator will vote for them, because the senator have to respect people's votes, right? But in practice, I think they already see what's happened. So then we go to the second time for the prime minister voting. Actually, Pitha and Move Forward trying to push their name again for the second time for voting session for the prime minister. But all the conservative side and the senator against this. So then that's why we go for the second time from the candidate from Pheu Thai Party, Sethha Thavisin. So Sethha Thavisin, got 482 votes from both houses. That's why he become the prime minister of Thailand. And he now travels a lot, just to introduce himself. But Sethha, he was running in the election only about 2 months before the election. Sethha was the millionaire in Thailand. He owned a lot of companies in Thailand. And he has, everyone in Thailand sort of know that he has a close connection with the Thaksin family. And now he become the prime minister. the questions rest a lot that can he really be independent to work? Because he doesn't really have MP or politicians in his hand. When he have to go through all the votes, like for example, the confidential debate or other vote for the budget, how can he convince all the MP to rest their hand in the parliament for him if the family of Shinawat said no? Or if any faction, don't want to support him? This is a big thing that Seta have to consider on how to manage all his administration under Pheu Thai party. And also, if you look at the people who work around him in the cabinet right now, there's no Seta people. Most of the people are appointed by the Pheu Thai party, or basically from the Thaksin family, people. And again, if Thaksin's daughter become the leader of the Pheu Thai next week, it means that Pheu Thai party totally controlled by these families again. So that's a questions. That's why a lot of people raise the question how Seta can be successful to become the Prime Minister of Thailand. Why Pheu Thai can win the Prime Minister? Because they could negotiate with the pro-military political party. In Thailand, to vote for the second time for the Prime Minister, I feel like it take forever because the negotiation was not finished, hasn't finished yet, did not finish. So then that's why they keep postponing for the second round of Prime Minister until the negotiations done. The coalition consisted of 11 political parties with 314 votes. And some of the two parties, the pro-military political party Palang Pracharat and United Thai Nation also joined the coalition party at this time. So Pheu Thai will get a lot of difficult time in the next election because I believe that most of the Pheu Thai supporters, they don't want Pheu Thai to join with the military. So how can Pheu Thai will tell their people in the next election that they are really democratic side, not the conservative side, because they already have the pro-military political party join their coalition? This is a big challenging for Pheu Thai in the next election. And again, don't expect that. Don't be sure that the next election in Thailand will be in the next 4 years, because Thailand always have the elections before the end of the term of the administration. Well, this is also about the updates of Thailand. Thank you very much.
Check. For those of you who have questions, I'd like to kindly request you to hold the question until the Q&A sections after this. Now, after Punchada, we have Dr. Ko Ying Hoi from Malaysia. Ko, time is yours.
Morning, everyone. So my topics here to talk about Malaysia will be a little bit different from what Punchada has elaborated with you on the Thailand context. My paper will be focusing more about the civil society and how election actually impact on the civil society's actors because of the elections. So I put my paper as the name of Civil Society and Contention in Post GE14, General Elections 14 in Malaysia, Dynamics and Implication. GE14 in 2018 was the time that the Malaysia, for the first time that managed to actually change the government after our independence. So it took us about some 60 years, more than that. Yeah, so it was a long time. Earlier on, Farish mentioned that elections is a fun time. It is a fun time for a lot of people. But it is a really challenging time for civil society, for those who are working on human rights, especially before 2018. Every time the election, the status quo stay. Unfortunately, also from what Farish has mentioned, democratic culture is missing, is barely there. And I would say not even really there in Malaysia even today. While I can still say it is in the democratization process, but it is incredibly slow, and sometimes it moves forward, but sometimes it's actually moved backward. And everything is controlled by actually the political parties and as well as the state as well. Hence, it put up a lot of challenges on the pro-rights civil society actors. Unfortunately, in the context of Malaysia, the missing piece is that the NGOs work very much depend on who is the government and who is our prime minister. Similarly, like the case in Thailand, we don't get to choose our prime minister. Prime minister is a puzzle, you know, how a person become a prime minister. So we don't have a say when it comes to that. Hence, so how do I move? Okay, now I can move. Okay, so this paper is really about Malaysian politics after the GE14, whereby, as I mentioned, it marked the first transition of government power from the previous Barisan Nasional to Pakatan Harapan after 60 years. And a lot of literatures in the context of Malaysia when it comes to electoral politics are very much focused on how political parties are playing the games in terms of changing coalitions and how the politicians are playing in a role in terms of changing our politics situations. There are very limited literatures, and because it is not as exciting as it is, because civil societies actors are basically, our work are very much depends on who the government is and whether we have that favorable environments for us to actually champion the human rights discourse. So to fill in the gap, I would like to focus on the changes in pro-rights civil society actors' repertoire of contention, meaning looking at how the strategies of these civil societies have changed since the elections in 2018. So what are the forms of contentions where the notion of human rights is challenged? So before the change of government, even the human rights concept is not only in Malaysia, but in the whole Southeast Asia itself, human rights concept is highly contentious and debatable. And one of the contentious one is LGBTs. It is taken as human rights is a Western value. It shouldn't be adopted in our own countries and several more. And it happens even today, whereby the LGBTs is being criminalized, even during our democratization process, by a prime minister whom the civil society has put a lot of hopes to change that narrative of human rights in terms of not criminalizing certain groups, but yet to actually talk about dignities and the human rights of every people's on the same status. So I propose use this concept of consentful contentions from the pro-rights civil societies, because if you imagine 60 years under the Barisan Nasional, whereby human rights is very much highlighted or hijacked by Islamic values, that there is only one version of the rights, but not the universality. Hence, the change of governments in 2018 really put up a lot as a turning point for a lot of pro-rights NGOs. So, in my paper, I argue that this consentful contention means previous time it is always with protests and so forth. We have not really seen big protests in recent years. While one of the recent one is about Palestine, but yet it is done in a stadium. That is not the protest that we meant, but it is still very political. But peaceful assembly should be allowed, for instance. So those are the things are the one that have not changed even since after the elections. So what I would like to argue is that previously it was not consentful because the space are not being given much by the civil society. But after the change of government, there is a space provided by the civil society, although it is not 100%, but yet the challenge then came in. It also diversified the space for the other groups of pro-rights groups. In Malaysia, there are two different versions of human rights. One is the more of the UDHR human rights. But the other version is really the Islamic version of the human rights. But the space have been given to both, and hence that's the mess of what we are currently at. So this split interviews, the split views on the impact of GE14 is really, how I'm gonna do this is really about using my own position as an insider approach, whereby before the change of government in 2018, apart from being in the universities, I've been active in the NGOs as well. But I can see very clearly how that particular space that being provided has actually changed. Previously, our strategies is very much not being an allies, but rather we will go to the opposition parties or the governments who are more open or who are willing. If we go for the oppositions, it is the oppositions who are more willing to push the agenda, so that will be our allies. But then, during that time, before the change of government, we can also go to those people who are in the government, but is more friendly. So those were the strategies that the NGOs have been using. But the change of the politics in 2018 have some form transformed that. So what I would like to say is that the paper basically involves a process of how the perspective on the repertoires of contention has really changed in a country that experiencing democratization with a focus on the human rights discourse. So, consentful contention here means a strategy of political engagement in which the claim makers openly contested demands by appealing to the state's dominant ideologies. So this is where I said, previous time before the change of government, the ideology was totally different. Hence, consentful contention contention still happen, but somehow there is a certain form of consent that being given. Nevertheless, in fact, I prepared this in 2020. Now it's 2023. We had another round of election in 2022, which we were hoping that this form of the consentful contentions can be actually bigger, but unfortunately, the findings still stay the same because the status quo did not really change too much, even when we have Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim currently as the Prime Minister, because of the unity governments that we have, that is the coalitions of Pakatan Harapan, his own coalitions, but with the previous rivalry, Barisan Nasional. So there was this contested ideologies when it comes to human rights that we had to come to the compromise. So on this consentful contention here, what we said is that there is this change of repertoires of contention from previously is more disruptive. So now there's a lot of pro-rights NGOs who have hesitance or reluctance to actually go on the street, because when you messed up with what is currently already you enjoy, you might actually return back and you're stuck in between. So mass protests, while in some of the minds of pro-rights NGOs, that thinking that maybe this is what we should continue doing, but they were extremely cautious under this very fragile situation. This shows how elections, even though during this process of democratizations, can be so vulnerable for the pro-rights civil society actors. So the methodological approach, as I mentioned, is a documentation of my own experience as a scholar activist, engages in the different partnership with the different rights actors, either at the federal level or at the state level or at the countries with the NGOs level. So that was a really drastic changes that we can actually see. But of course, being as an insider, there's also biasness that maybe came across, but this will be something that I might write in the paper later to actually further explore on this. So this analysis on the forms of contention in post-GE14, basically, so if you look at the situations of the human rights in Malaysia, currently we have quite a big different groups in Malaysia, and because of the limited resources that we have, hence a lot of pro-rights NGO actually build their own network. So there are several instances such as CSO Platform for Reforms, whereby they actually combine different pro-rights civil societies being in the same networks to actually fight for human rights there. So the consentful contention here happens when we see that the contentious approach, while they still continue to use some form of very limited contentious approach. Yeah, hence that's why I said they have reservations to actually go down on the street, because they don't want to, somehow they want to maintain the status quo, but because since the political change in Malaysia in 2018, the politics has not been very stable. We have seen I think the 4 changes in terms of our Prime Minister. It is a totally new experience for Malaysians. Yet, but the motivation still exists somehow among the civil society groups. So this is the 2 reasons that I put in here that to explain why consentful contentions that happen. One is that the access to institutional channels have opened up wider, because previously in the before 2018, the space was very limited for a lot of pro-rights NGO that actually be able to even secure any meetings or even to talk about human rights issues that the government might not be supportive. So there was opportunities coming from the Alliance of Hope or Pakatan Harapan, the then oppositions, that actually providing that for the NGOs to actually look at, okay, now the space has been opened, this is where we should grab the opportunities. So that particular space not open up only in the NGOs world. I would like to describe this definition of civil society to also should include academia communities as well, because the space in the university has drastically changed at the same time, because human rights NGOs not only operate within, outside the campus, but inside the campus there are courses that we teach that also need such a space to actually talk about human rights. So there were a few initiatives that were being able to taken off since the change of politics in Malaysia in 2018, including, for example, workshop on human rights activism. Previous time, whoever that we wanted to invite back to the universities, you really have to see who, how is the politics like, because anytime it will be very difficult and challenging to have someone very controversial within the campus itself. So there were a lot of a few initiatives that were being taken. So for instance, one of the example here is we have this very famous artist, Fahmi Reza, who are very good in drawings, comics, and many other things. He was trying to actually organize democracy talks in many universities. So, but in the beginning of the change of politics, in my university, I was able to get him in to actually talk about student activism in the University of Malaya, which is a part of the history has been very limited discourse, and nobody really want to talk about it anymore to actually reactivate the student activism within the space of universities. But now, over the time, after 2018, and even the 2022 and so forth, we have started to see the repression has unfortunately increased at the same time. However, the pro-rights NGOs continue with these consentful contentions that using the access to institutional channels whereby the common ground is really to find how they can join forces to actually push the agenda of the human rights in the countries. So some of the institutional channels was available there to actually challenge the state actions. For example, during the beginning of the 2018, there was Council of Eminent Persons, Electoral Reform Movements, Malaysian Media Council that has been still ongoing debates, as well as APPGM. SDGs is one of the success stories when it comes to the SDGs agenda. But what the pro-rights civil society did at that time was, SDGs is a political agenda that none of the countries will say no, because they've seen development as a very soft type of human rights. But the human rights group, pro-human rights group, have managed to actually tweak the agenda to actually, because Goal 16 is about peace and justice. Yeah, so they advocated for the formation of network comprising of civil society as well as member of parliaments, but to be parked under the Parliament of Malaysia to actually championing the human rights during the change of the politics since 2018, and hence the establishments of these all parliamentary systems inside the parliaments has took place. And the second thing is, I also witnessed the diversification of space through the opportunities that are being given since the change of government in 2018. So the concepts of these political opportunity structures is always context dependent. In the context of Malaysia here, whereby the regime type actually shapes the context in which contentious politics can emerge, and the forms that they take actually explain how the claims of human rights here advance in the post-GE 14 here. So the pro-rights actors' behavior continued until today to be shaped by the specific opportunities that are available, that is continue to be embedded by the national context. Pro-rights actors here, they use this productive symbiosis. They're thinking that still in the end of the day, with the unity government that we have, with the Alliance of Hope and the National Alliance, but the space is something that they still need to protect. And hence, they are maneuver within the space by producing this symbiosis relationship. But it has come with two key challenges. Not to say the anti-rights groups, which also use the language of human rights. So we have several groups. For example, one of the groups is called as Centra. It was NGOs that being funded by the previous government to drive the agenda of human rights, but based on their version of human rights. Because in Malaysia, we also have our National Human Rights Action Plan that was extremely contentious, and until today, it has not taken off. It was with our legal department under the Prime Minister's department. Thus far, a lot of money have been pumped in to produce that action plan. But that action plan, not talking about UDHR, it talk about Cairo Declaration of Human Rights, which can be very dangerous in terms of having the different interpretations of human rights that happening in Malaysia, because it is a multiracial country, and we have had the racial riot in 1969. So all these different episodes can actually being hijacked and politicized to actually interpret human rights differently. The challenges that currently now we're facing because of the diversification of space are two. One, the legitimize of the anti-rights groups. The anti-rights groups, I put, depending on how you look at the human rights norms, of course, is that they are also given the space in terms of media visibilities, in writing the columns, as well as our televisions, to actually have the agenda of, for example, one of the agenda is rehabilitations of LGBTs. They should be rehabilitated. So those are, of course, for pro-rights, is a very dangerous scenarios to be happens in the countries during the democratization process. So the notion of human rights is politicized for political benefits. So one of the controversial remarks by the current Prime Minister is that LGBTs will not be tolerated in the country. That itself has killed a lot of agendas by the pro-rights NGO, which actually before that joined forces with that coalitions to actually drive the agenda of opening up more space for human rights and democracy itself. So other actors may also write on the opportunities, whereby this is where we see there are actually already recent literatures that writing on what happened with the human rights situation in Malaysia. And interestingly enough, we can see how the processes of democratization can actually shape and influence the repertoires of contentions among the pro-rights advocacy actors, which is very limited discourse there. Because people talk about elections, they think about, okay, maybe political party work together with the civil society, and maybe then they produce certain forms of outcomes and so forth. But democratization itself can actually shape the different strategies by the pro-rights civil societies as well. And the second one is the contestations of human rights norms here. While we have already witnessed the lack of human rights practice in many phases of developments, and in the context of Malaysia, it is still very much subjected to cultural relativisms. And this, against the understanding of human rights, is very low in the context of Malaysia, because there's no human rights education, basically. I mean, not in the schools or not in university as well. There's only a few courses that we teach to talk about human rights. So there's always these misperceptions of when we talk about universality, we don't care about culture. But that is not the case if you understand the human rights concept, because the principles is about non-discriminations and many other principles that actually using the UDHR, which Malaysia is also part of it. So if you look at the records of Malaysia in terms of human rights, we have only signed and ratified 3 international human rights treaties even until today. So that was one of the things that have been continued in terms of this status quo, despite of the democratization process that we are currently at. And one of the interesting episodes here is also about in Malaysia, back then in 2018 or 2019, we have actually a very huge protest to actually protest against our government that when they want to sign and ratify ICET. ICET is the international treaties on the combating racial discrimination. You have not seen any countries in the world that have their own people to actually fight against their own government when they want to sign and ratify international human rights treaties. And that episode itself can actually become one of the signals or one of the indicator how serious or how low in terms of the awareness of understanding human rights concept in the countries itself. And this trend has not changed even after 2018 until today. And now it has impacted on the pro-rights civil society groups that ICET is a very sensitive word to be used. Because whenever if you talk about ICET, it can backfire to the pro-rights civil society. And yet the governments that they have elected, unfortunately, it is now as a unity government. It has been a really difficult, challenging period to actually, you can't move right and you can't move left either. You can only stay wherever that you are with the spaces that you are given. Hence, that is why I use this consentful contention. While the contentious politics persists, but there is this consentful that they're trying to do in order to see where are we actually moving to. So in conclusion, there are two factors here, as I just now mentioned: the existing institutional channels and diversification of space that are made possible for this form of consentful contention to actually happen. So, however, this I do not intend to overemphasize the transformative effect of the human rights during the Alliance of Hope, very short-lived administrations, because since in November 2022, it is no longer just by the then oppositions who are more pro-rights, but it is with the different ideologies. So there are contestation of even political ideologies here in the context of Malaysia. So, coming from the lens of an insiders, I must, my finding is really there is a change in the repertoires of contention by the pro-rights actors following the elections and the electoral change that happened in Malaysia in 2018 and by 2022 as well. With that, I'll end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ying Hui. And again, I would like to kindly request all of you to hold your questions. The final speaker this morning is from our own Dr. Jayadi Hanan, presenting the Indonesian case. Mas Jai, time is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everyone. I think the title is very American. Yeah, as you know, imperial presidency is borrowed from the American concept of imperial presidency. So I think I have to borrow the term from Professor Faris. It should be changed to the Devaraja's presidencies. That's number one. Number two, I would like to make a bit of a disclaimer. Maybe the title is a bit provocative. So I think it is okay because this is a work in progress. I might change the title a little bit when it is going to be sent to a journal. Maybe. Okay. I think at least during the last 10 years, or particularly in during the last 5 years of the second term of Jokowi's presidency, or Joko Widodo's Indonesian presidents, at least there are at least two things I think that can be considered as characterize the presidencies or the Indonesian democracy in general. One is the persistence of the so-called personalized politics or personalization of politics, just like Professor Paris mentioned before. The second is the one that I mentioned here, the increasingly dominant executive in Indonesia. In Larry Diamond's term, it is called executive aggrandizement. So this executive aggrandizement coupled with the so-called democratic stagnation or regression that have been detected by many observers or researchers in Indonesia, including probably Professor Greg Philly, I think. So this executive aggrandizement coupled with personalization of politics, and in the context of democratic regression or stagnations, I think have been putting Indonesia during the last 5 years into the brink of autocratization. Maybe that is too bold a statement, but let's see whether I can carry on. The question is, can election of 2024, which will be conducted in February 10, 2024 in Indonesia, be at least a halt to this process of democratic erosion or deteriorations? It's a big question, but I will answer it very lightly. To put it into context, I think this is one of example of how Indonesian democracy has been deteriorating or during the last almost 2 decades. Yeah, this is from Larry Diamond's calculations. So you see here all of the indicators here. The one that is a bit okay is only in terms of electoral democracy. Others, in terms of liberal democracy from FIDEM, in terms of the state of the freedom in Indonesia, and also in terms of the democracy in general based on Economics Intelligence Unit measurement, Indonesia is moving toward the decline of democracy in general. According to thank you. I will be having many. I will use it when I think I can use it. If we are looking at the causes of the possible democratic breakdown by Larry Diamond, for instance, there are 6, right? But if we identify in Indonesia, there are, in my opinion, there are at least 4 of the possible causes of democratic breakdown, which can bring Indonesia into democratic breakdown. One is the weak rule of law. We all know about that, including the last ruling of the Indonesian Mahkamah Konstitusi, not Mahkamah Keluarga, Constitutional Court. And then the personalization of political parties, we know this. The presidential, this is my term, presidential majoritarianism, or in Larry Diamond's term is executive aggrandizement. And then the low trust to parliament and parties, which also have been characterized Indonesian democracy in general during the last at least 10 years. But in this presentation, I will just focus only one, which is the executive aggrandizement or presidential majoritarianism. So this is the conceptual framework. I'm not gonna read this, but I think based on the literature review that I have conducted, at least so far, there are at least 3 types of presidentializations which can bring to the executive aggrandizement. One is the so-called personalization of politics. For example, political parties are all controlled by certain personal figures, even become the vehicle for certain personal figures to access the power, and so on and so forth. That's number one. Elections has been always centered around personal figures, both at the level of presidential elections and also at the level of legislative elections. And then that is personalized politics. Number 2, the second type of presidentialization is the so-called internal division of a political party because they have representative in parliament or in House of Representatives, and they also have representative in the executive. Usually the focus is on the president's party. So it is clear, for instance, in Indonesia, the executive is coming from the same political party, but they do not always have common policies. They can be in conflict with each other. So there's an internal division between the party in the parliament of the president and the party in the executive, in this case, the president. And the other one is the executive dominations. The executive domination can be because of many things. One of the institutional characteristic of Indonesian multi-party presidentialism is, presidentialism in general, is the so-called the perils of presidentialism, in which one of which is the so-called presidential majoritarianism tendency, majoritarian tendency of presidential system, because the president is only one. It has a legitimacy directly to the people. It has to, the president has to govern with the support of the parliament. To do so, he needs to make compromise or to make a conflict with the parliament. As a result, there is a possibility of the president to go alone with his own or her own political power, ignoring including the possibility of ignoring his own political parties. Otherwise, they will be in collusion with each other. Otherwise, this is the so because of the possibility of this internal division, then the president must find a way of bypassing the possibility of being halted or being obstructed by the parliament, among whom is his own political party members. If he can find a way to do so, then the executive aggrandizement is one of the possibility. He becomes more and more imperial in his presidency, or he becomes more and more acting like a Devaraja, if possible. Again, I borrow your term twice, Pak Faris. So that means your presentation was very, very useful for this presentation. Okay, now I will jump to save the time. There are two presidencies in Indonesia from 2004 to 2023. One is SBY presidencies. In my view, there was only one type of presidentialization during SBY, which is type 1, the personalization of politics in general. There is only one. The second type, which is internal division between president's party and partisan support, there was none, at least in general, in SBY's presidency. Why? Not because SBY was very good or very sincere or something like that. Maybe because he had a very good intention. Maybe, but I think the more structural explanation is that because the president at the time was also the leader of his own political party, right? Because of the personalization of politics, for instance, the president can control his own political party. More so, even more so, the vice president at the time, Yusuf Kala, one of the founder of this university, Yusuf Kala was also the leader of the second biggest political party, particularly in the was the biggest political party in parliament. So president and vice president were all the leaders of political parties in the parliament. Therefore, internal division were not there at the time. Now, what about the third type of presidentialization, the executive aggrandizement? At least comparatively speaking, I would say there was no excessive executive aggrandizement during SBY's presidency. Number one, in my view, I did not see any serious attempt of SBY as a president to prolong his presidency, to amend the constitution, to get the third term, or to expand his second term. And this is a constraint, I think. The constraint is that not like the current president, SBY's presidency was considered normal presidencies compared to other presidencies in the world. Usually, the president will have very high approval rating in the first term and low approval rating in the second term. SBY was a kind of normal in that sense. Very low approval rating, so it was very difficult for him to ask for another term at the time. Now let's consider Jokowi's. I think all three types of presidentializations was happening in Jokowi's presidencies. Number one, personalization of politics is still there. I think we don't need to explain too much about this. And even more so, almost all of the leaders of political parties are the member of his cabinets, right? Second type of presidentialization, not like in SBY's presidencies, was happening during Jokowi's presidency. There is a clear internal division, sometimes contradicting policies between the president and his own political parties, whether it was whether it is expressed openly or expressed closely. Only the researchers can detect that. One of the very famous example is the last one. The president decided to hold World Cup, FIFA World Cup of under 20. But his own political party said no. The reason is because according to his own political party, there was Israel team that would come to Indonesia and blah, blah, blah. But the point is that there is a very clear and very famous example of how the president is against his own political party in one of very important decision. There are many other things, but I just would like to mention one. Now, the rise of imperial presidency, the rise of the increasingly dominant executive also is happening during presidency of Jokowi. Part of the reasons are, one, as you know, the so-called oversized and too broad presidential governing coalitions. At least officially until today, at least, the size of presidential governing coalition is around 82%. 82. Leaving only two political parties outside of his governing coalition, Democrat, the party of Democrat, and the party of PKS. So the size of formal, or let's say sort of official opposition is only around 18%. Number two, the members of presidential governing coalitions are actually not only political parties. It can be extended into other groups, like women groups, geographical areas groups, social organizations like Muhammadiyah and NU, and so on and so forth. So the governing coalitions of the president is not only oversized in terms of the size in the parliament, but also oversized in terms of including almost all of the groups. So the coalition is very eclectic, leaving very, very limited room for opposition. Number two, I think, institutionally, Indonesian president is very powerful. It has no veto power, but no proposal of bills can be discussed unless with the consent of the president. From the very beginning, for instance. So, the initiation of budget bill should be coming from the president, for instance, and many other things. So, institutional power of Indonesian president constitutionally is very strong. And then his partisan power also very strong, as I mentioned before. Almost no way of him being halted or being obstructed in advancing his agenda in the parliament, as long as those 82% of political parties are in complying with him. Interestingly, only one political party seems to be willing to be against the president, his own political party. Others are always in compliance with the president, including the former nemesis of the president's party, the party of the former nemesis of the president, Prabowo, right, which is Gerindra. And then president also has a going public strategy. You know, during the last two terms of him, he always maintained his direct relationship with the voters and with the so-called volunteers group, and so on and so forth. Number two, he has a very high approval rating. It is not comparatively a bit not normal, yeah, because usually the president in his second term will be having very low approval rating, but the President Jokowi, has the highest approval rating in his second term. making him a very strong political players for the next election. And then he has a very strong connection to his own 2019 and 2014 supporters. You know, those two elections were very polarized, making the president has a very strong and militant sort of partisan supporters. And then this phenomena is coupled with the tendency of all political parties not in favor of being in opposition. Everybody wants to be part of the governing coalitions, if the possibility is there. You know, even the official opposition party or outside of the governing coalition, Partai Demokrat, known to be trying to always be part of the government. So with that, it seems that the president has no serious obstacle to be increasingly dominant in his presidency. Now, is there any serious attempt to increase or to be more and more dominant? I think we know we can detect several serious attempts. Number one, there is a serious attempt to extend the president's term of office with two options. One, to become 3 terms, or to extend the second term. There is a serious attempt. Officially, it did not come from the president himself, officially. But as a political scientist, we know that there is a serious and orchestrated attempt to do so. When this attempt, which I call the highest call of this president, when this attempt was failed, then there was another serious attempt to be the so-called kingmaker, to be, influencing the possible result of the next election. One is by trying to influence the presidential candidate nominations. I think Indonesians know that the first attempt is to try to influence the nomination in his own political party, which considered to be failed. And after that, the president is trying to influence the candidacy of the possible winner. In this case, Prabowo Subianto's candidacy, coupled with the last attempt to put the president's sons as the candidate. Seems to be to maintain the possibility of being in power very long. So I'm worried about the timing. Yeah, 10 more minutes, okay. Because when we teach, we usually forget ourselves, particularly about the timing. And second thing is that when you speak in English, it takes you Indonesian, it takes a longer time. Okay. Now, as I have laid down some sort of data about the phenomena of the increase or the rise of Deva Raja's presidency or imperial presidency. Is it possible to be halted or to be slowed down? I'm not saying to be stopped. It's too optimistic. Is it possible to be halted or to be slowed down a little bit? And I think the election can be a venue to do so, with some conditions. That is my argument. Yeah. But before that, we have to thank to two actors, which has been able to stop the serious attempt to extend the presidency's term, both in terms of extending the second term or making the president become the possible to have the third term. I think those two actors are one, president's own party. So you see here, second type of presidentialization, in this case, is in contradiction with the third type of presidentialization. So it seems that the phenomena of presidentializations has its own corrective mechanism, with a big note. If the president is not from the same governing political party. That's number one. Number two, we have to thank to the public. I will show you later on about this. So this tendency of Deva Raja's presidency, in my view, can be halted at least temporarily by these three. One, as I mentioned, second type of presidentialization. Two, the public. And three, the cycle of election. Why Indonesian public is rejecting that idea? This is based on post-colonial types of survey, Pak. Democratic measurement, post-colonial types of democratic measurement. I was very struck by the presentation of Pak Paris. Yeah. One, you see here, in general, Indonesian commitment to democracy is quite high. They said that democracy is the most preferable system. They said democracy is capable enough to solve the problem of the country. They said that no armed forces should be in power. They said also no strong leader should be in power. They also no single party only should be in power. And they said that democracy is the most suitable political system for Indonesia, despite all of the weaknesses that they have. Right? In general, strong. But you see, from 2019 to 2021, there is a common feature there, right? The commitment is lowering down. And I think if we continue this graph into 2022, 23, there is a continuation of that. Now, what about the satisfaction with democratic performance? This one is democratic commitment, right? Normative. When they see the democratic performance, you see here, the data is until February 2022. You see there is sharp decline, a positive of satisfaction of Indonesian in general to the practice of democracy. The practice of democracy. They can see it from the situation of economy, the situation of the stability of politics, security, law enforcement, and so on and so forth. But in general, there is a tendency of being dissatisfied with the practice of democracy in Indonesia in general. Now, we have a specific public opinion survey on whether the public reject the proposal of having more than two terms of the presidency or expanding the current presidency's term. Oh, sorry. Not. It's clear, yeah. I'm sorry for cluttering your mind because of this very messy graph. But the point is, if you look at the red numbers, basically the rejection of those proposals. So you see here, the proposal, either because of, we ask the public, do you agree with the extension? Because extension is needed, for instance, or term is needed because we are still in pandemic, because we need economic recovery, because we need to ensure the development of new capital, and so on and so forth. Because those are the reasons mentioned at the time of as the background of the proposal. You see here, gender-wise, age-wise, ethnic, based on ethnic, based on religion, all majority rejected. The same here, people in the village, people in the cities, people in Sumatra, Banten, Jakarta, and so on and so forth. You see the red number. Oh yeah. It's always like that. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Okay. Now, geography-wise, rejection, right? The people, maybe we see, maybe people who are not satisfied with democracy will be, will be supporting that idea. No, they don't support the idea. Or maybe maybe the supporters of the president will be supporting. No, even the supporters of the president, the voters of Jokowi and Ma'ruf Amin in 2019, they also rejected the idea, but with a note. You see the number. The number is much lower compared to the others. Yeah. So the susceptibility of Jokowi's voters, like Mas Gede, of being in line with the proposal are more compared to other groups. But including, if we look at from the basis of the voters' legislative election of the political parties, similar things in general happen. So the publics basically rejected the idea. I don't know. We need to ask Pak Paris. Is it because Indonesians are constitutional, or because they are very rational? I don't know. We'll see the explanation. Now, this is another example. We asked them, between the two statements, which one is more in line with your own opinion? COVID-19 pandemic and economic recovery must be prioritized, although election must be postponed until 2027. You see, the ones who agree with that only around 27 or only around 25, right? %. The one who disagree, which favor the opinion or the statement of national leadership succession must be conducted in 2024 election, although we are still in pandemic. Overwhelmingly said we need to do election, whether or not we are still in pandemic. Okay. Now, what about beyond this is going to be my last. Beyond 2024 elections, I don't know, maybe this is my hope, yeah? I think we can still hope that elections of 2024 can, let's say, rejuvenate democracy if 3 reasons are there. One, I think it can ensure the public, the participation of the public, yeah, because there is a fear that public's participation will be some sort of being circumscribed or something like that, being re-engineered, and there's a kind of fear. But if that does not happen, I think election can be still democratic. And we consider the possibility of alignment, de-alignment, and realignment of elites' political power because of the election, right? And it is happening, I think, at least now. At least now, Jokowi's coalitions has been, moving into several coalitions for presidential candidates, and so on and so forth. So there is a kind of alignment and de-alignment. And changing the president could change the style of governing, and also the elite configurations in terms of powers after the election. But it depends on what kind of configurations and reconfigurations after the president is elected. Or, as you know, in Indonesia, there is a possibility of having 3 steps of coalition. one is coalitions for presidential election first round. Second is coalition for second round. And the third is coalition for government or for governing. Those could be different, but also could be the same. If what happens is like in 2019, the main opposition leader, the nemesis, becomes part of the governing the government. That could ensure the possibility of having more presidentialization. Other than that, we have to look for the style of leadership of each of these candidates. Which one is more prone to be to democratic regression? Which one has more democratic commitment? So, anybody wants this? The current state of the race, according to our latest survey of February. October, sorry. I remember the February election. So you see, if three-way match-up between Prabowo, Ganjar, and Anies, Prabowo seems to be leading a bit, but with very small margin, only 2% in October. Anies still in 2023. But if we look at the strong versus weak voters, around 25% to 30% of the voters who have decided to vote based on the survey, they said it is still very possible for them to change their mind. So swing voters are still quite high, meaning that the race will be still very competitive. Jokowi voters in 2019 seems to be divided into number one Ganjar, and then Prabowo, then Anies. We'll see the distribution. Meanwhile, Prabowo's supporters in 2019 is majority still with Prabowo until early October. Yeah. Okay. Now, head-to-head match-up. Based on this data, Prabowo Subianto got the most chance of winning because when he, when Prabowo is with Anies Baswedan, he would win. When Prabowo with Ganjar Pranowo, he also would win in this data. Yeah. So he has the most possible. He has the highest chance, at least for now. We will see the changing of the dynamic after the ruling of MK. I checked it last week together with Pak Philip. No change yet, but I think we agree that probably because the time is too short to check. Okay. Now, similar support if the three pairs are being simulated. Yeah, similar. So, you see the same, similar, yeah? So, Prabowo Gibran is still in the second round possible to have the highest chance of winning. With that, I think based on this current state of the race, I think one is that the race will be competitive. Two, the race seems to be impossible to be only one round. There will be very strong possibility of having two rounds. And third, I think based on this data, second round is still anybody's game. Second round, still anybody's game. With that, so whether or not election 2024 will be resulting in the possibility of us to halt the presidentialization or the executive aggrandizement, hence the possibility of more democratic deterioration, is really depending on who's going to be the winner and what is the coalitions which will be formed after second round, after the first round, and after the president-elect is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Jai. Thank you so much. Now it's time for Q&A. We are welcoming questions from the floor. We have 30 minutes, give and takes. Please do raise your hand and introduce yourself shortly before asking question. We have a lot of questions, yeah. I'll start from Mbak Linda here and then two from the back later. Mas Arya, and then Fahmi. Yes.
Thank you. I have a question for Punchada on the Thai Move Forward Party. It seems to me that this is a generation issues, and I think Indonesia also have a similar situation, but it's going terribly wrong with the PSI party. So would you like to explain more on the demographic structures of the Thai in Thailand, and who are these voters of Thai Move Forward Party? Are they the one that get a very impact from the policies that the military regime government already been in since they are in power, or there's something else in terms of the critical view to the palace? Just want to check. Perhaps you can elaborate a bit on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Let's just take the question first before I'll give presenter answering the questions. Yeah. Mas Arya and then Mas Fahmi. But please introduce yourself briefly and then state your questions briefly as well.
Okay, terima kasih. Thank you, Mas Gede. Okay, I'd like to ask Thailand's politic from Dr. Punchinda. It's quite counterintuitive with the global trend that personal politics matters a lot in everywhere, even in advanced democracies. But Move Forward Party seems to be like party politics as such, meaning that, well, maybe institution matters or the party platform matters, that they challenge the status quo and so forth. But my question is not about causal factors that pave the way of Move Forward Party, but what sort of conditioning factors where this party get a lot of electoral supports, meaning that is there any something like demographic shift where the young voters is quite a lot in Thailand currently, or is there any something like economic stagnancy where the citizens overall seems that they prefer change from the status quo, or other conditioning factors that create this party gain a lot of support. And for Mas Jayadi, Indonesian politics currently seems to replicate Philippine politics, I think. Maybe we will have talk after lunch, I think, but the Bongbong Marcos, the old politicians, the son of the Ferdinand Marcos, has Sarah Duterte, which is the daughter of the incumbent, with the high approval rating as well. If I'm not mistaken, it's 80% as well at the end of his term. So it seems to me that family matters here as well in Indonesia, but yeah, families. I mean, like it's kind of strongest political institution, right? What do you think? Will it be something like Philippinizations in the next election, or it will have something different feature? Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Arya. Great questions. Yes, Mas Jay. Definitely, Mas Jay. Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you,
Mas Fahmi.
Mas Gede. I am Fahmi, master student in FOS UII. My question is for Paris. My question actually is general. I think because Paris is more talk about the Asian way, Asian value. We know nowadays we face that maybe like Bon Marcos also win the election, and now also we see the Prabowo is running for 4 times become candidate. If we see the tradition that Asian people maybe sometimes, yes, you said that election is for fun, but we already forget the history of substancy, right? Because we know that these people has bad history, but because Bon win because have fun of TikTok, right? And now Prabowo also gemoy. She produced gemoy term. So we forget the history. Why? This is because because as people forget, I mean, it's actually become the forgiving people or forgiving nation. So yeah, I think this is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mas Fahmi. Mas Jay, would you like to pose your question now or answering first?
My question is for Professor Faris. I am very intrigued by your presentation, Pak. But okay, my question is to Pak Faris. Okay, we have two very strong legacies or inheritance, pre-colonial inheritance like Devaraja things, where public spare is very limited, right? And then we have colonial inheritance. Now, modern Southeast Asia has been here for more than, let's say, 7 decades, right? Modern, after the colonialism, so like post-colonial. So the question is there any learning curve by Southeast Asianists, right? Or they are doomed to always follow those inheritance, Pak Paris? Yeah. I am in favor of insider perspective of Southeast Asia. Could you say something about that? Thank you.
I think we'll take those questions first, and I let the presenters to take the question. Maybe start from Punchada. We have 2 questions for Punchada, 2 for Mas Faris, and 1 for Mas Jay. Yeah. Punchada, time is yours.
Check.
I have a question too, but maybe second round. Yeah, this is a generation problem in Thai politics. Before 2019 election, it was the divide between the rich and poor in Thailand in order to vote for political parties. Maybe you heard about red shirt and yellow shirt, right? So basically, red shirt is for the rural poor in Isan, and yellow shirt is the middle class. But now it's switched to the generations. Before among the young, and we always say that the baby boomer generation, they always love the military. They believe that we need to protect the royal family, and any amendments that want to change the law related to the royal family, especially the 112 article related to lay majesty law. All these people and the old generation, they cannot accept it. And even in the lay majesty law in Thailand is really strong law. You can be arrested for 20 years if only you click like on their page that say something negative to the palace. So that's why the move forward just want to change this. And the other thing is about the economics. During the military junta, our economic development was slowed down, and we want change. People don't have money. Even though the military claim that during the COVID time they can do the best, and compared to other ASEAN countries, Thailand is the best on how to solve the COVID problem. But in practice, people still don't have money. So then that's why they want to change. They want the new policies on everything. And the last one, we have choice. Before the emergence of the Future Forward and Move Forward, not many people dare enough to set up political parties. As I mentioned earlier, that most of the political party in Thailand always form from the factions, families, mafia, group of a lot of powerful figures in provinces. They form together to the new party. So that's why most of the political party in Thailand, they don't survive long. About 10 years or maybe one election, and then there's another new political party. But this time, this is the first time that we have choice that political party form from the voters, people. And you don't need to have money. You don't need to belong to any big family in order, to be a part of political party. This is a good thing. Even Pita, if he, get out from politics, I believe that Move Forward still survive. That will be generation. But surprisingly enough, most of the Move Forward Party, they knows that their party is going to be dissolved again. They knows that by the Constitutional Court because there's a lot of case in the courts already. So what they did is they set up a group of the following generation, not only the next generation, but the other generations. So this time they already changed the party leader because in case that something happened to Pita and he has to be out from the politics. So then this group of new generation can be switched to the party leader, and they even already register for the new political party. If the Move Forward is dissolved, that they can transfer all their member to the new political parties. This is really funny in Thai politics. We're trying to promote democracy. We actually use Indonesians as a model that we want to be, a long-time political party, democratic, and there's no military in the politics anymore. But it's changed. Not the military itself that involved in politics in Thailand, but it's switched to the court. Constitutional Court is really always making things happen and trying to stop the growth and developments of political parties in Thailand.
Mas Faris.
Okay, learning curve. I think we learn, but we also learn, a lot of wonderful things. We learn about exploitation. We learn about consolidating power, centralizing power. We learn. So we are learning all the time. But since you asked, okay, over the last 7 decades, where have we been? Okay, let's look at 7 decades, from the 40s, 50s onwards. From the 50s until 1989, we were caught in the Cold War, where so much of our political culture, political praxis was shaped by that. We cannot deny this. We know this in our region. And again, Southeast Asia is not unique. This happens across Asia and Africa. From the 90s onwards, we have Iraq. And we have a succession of conflicts which eventually emerges into the discourse of war on terror. And so this securitizing discourse becomes the thing that defines so much of our politics in the region and our domestic politics as well. From 98 onwards, we've had the financial crisis and a succession of that. If you look at our learning curve, let's put aside politics and governance. Let's put aside democracy. Let's look at economics. You might as well ask the same question about, have we learned the lessons from the financial crisis? We are repeating exactly the same thing. We are seeing, property bubbles. We are seeing indiscriminate credit expansion, all the things that contributed to the crisis in 97. And even that was not unprecedented because it already happened in 85. So, yes, I do think societies learn, but who learns in society? Different groups, depending on their own invested interests, will choose to learn different things. Yeah. I had a student, I asked my students, why do you study history? And when one of the students comes up with this standard reply, because if you don't know your history, you will repeat the mistakes of the past. I said, look, every dictatorship on the planet learns from history, because history is a good textbook on how to build authoritarian power. So, so history goes both ways. And I think in that sense, I'd like to be optimistic as well. But I think if you look at what we are learning, I think we have several learning curves. And on that note, I want to look at one constituency, because we talk about youth and the question about youth and memory and forgetting. Who remembers anything anyway? We live in the age of TikTok, right? I mean, our memories are 3 minutes long. That's it, And yes, I mean, my cat has a longer memory than most of us, So, but my question is this, since some of us spoke about youth, I think there's a tendency to somehow flatten youth into a kind of global, universal thing, and I think that's very, very dangerous. 2 things. One, youth. I mean, they've always been young people. But youth as a political category is a new concept. Yeah. It's a post-World War II phenomenon. You look at your family albums, you look at photos of your grandparents. How were they dressed? They were dressed exactly like their parents. There's no youth fashion, no youth culture, nothing. This is the result of the post-war boom. And then suddenly people realize young people got money. And when you have money, capitalism embraces you. because you are good friends, because you can spend your parents' money, especially if you have your mother or father's credit card. And now suddenly you are a constituency. This constituency now becomes a political constituency. But let's ask this. As academics, I meet 20-year-olds all the time. I cannot assume that my students have the same experience that I had when I was 20 years old. Yeah? Ask yourself this, a 20-year-old Indonesian, a 20-year-old Malaysian, a 20-year-old Thai, what's their political memory? Yeah? If you're a 20-year-old Malaysian, born after 1998, you've only known shifting coalitional politics. That's your norm. That's your norm. I grew up where we had stable politics. None of my students have a tactile memory of this. So what's the norm for them? This is what we need to be asking the youth. The other thing, of course, related to this is living as we do in the age of late post-industrial capitalism and also the impending AI revolution and what have you. 20-year-olds now are watching the death of the middle class. And this is a global phenomenon. Yeah? When I'm teaching in Germany and when I teach in Southeast Asia, when I meet people in their 20s, young people in Europe and in Asia feel they will not have the lives of their parents. It's going to be harder for them to own property, harder for them to get a job, harder for them to have stability in their lives. That is what youth today are going through. Very different from what some of us here went through. Yeah? So on that count, I think that partly explains the phenomenon that we are seeing now. And this not willful forgetting, but you've got so many other things to worry about, right? You've got so many other things you worry about. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was in South Africa. I was in Soweto in the southwestern townships. Everyone has got HIV, right? So I asked the activists, aren't they worried? I said, look, we have diseases that can kill you in 24 hours. You get cerebral malaria in the morning, you'll be dead by midnight. AIDS takes 12 years to kill you, right? So people have got other priorities. And I think when you look at young people today, think of their priorities and their experiences and what they're going through. When my experience of teaching in Malaysia, Singapore, Europe, I think the concerns of the younger generation are very different from that of their parents. And I think smart politicians know that and know how to tap into that. And that's why what we are seeing across Southeast Asia is not only the emergence of youth politics, but also established political parties targeting youth in particular. You have parties that have special campaigns designed for this demographic. And this demographic is actually a category that we can understand through political economy. And I think that's why when we talk about, I don't think we are forgiving, but I think memory is selective. It's always selective. And smart politics, people who know how to play politics, know how to instrumentalize that selective memory. And I think they're doing it because they're targeting specific demographics. Some who want to forget, some who have got other issues that are more pressing for them. And I think this is what we are looking at. That's why when we try to map out these things, we're actually mapping out many things at the same time. And that's why I'm not comfortable to sort of say Malaysians or Indonesians, because I don't know what that is. But we have layers of society that I think deserve their own specific attention.
Thank you, Mas Faris. I think Mas Jai has one question from Mas Arya, yeah?
Is Indonesia experiencing Filipinization? This is my early observation, Mas Arya. I think there are two characteristics that can be considered as the similarities, at least, between Indonesia and the Philippines. One is some families are very strong politically, right? Two, governmental system is the same. Philippines and Indonesia are using presidential system. But there is one institutional important difference. In presidential term, Philippines has only one term, Indonesia has 2 terms. I think those institutional feature is important, which could make differences. Forgive me, I'm still believing in institutionalism. And a little bit. Now, is Indonesia experiencing a Filipinization? I think at the local level, yes. Right? at the local level? I think we can ask one of our colleagues, Yos Kenawas, right? Who is doing research on that. And I think his answer is confirmed. Some families are always in power, circling around them at the local levels, particularly district or municipalities level. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think at the national level, Filipinization seems to be a bit more difficult. One, to have only certain families that with that kind of strength politically, you need a lot of social and material base, right? All over Indonesia. That is, I think, not very easy. Number two, in terms of presidential election, we have two-term presidencies. One president has a very big incentive in the first term to be serving people at least, right? Just like what we have in Jokowi's term, right? So that will put another family to stay longer to get the power, right? And that also will put somebody who is not coming from strong family to build his own strong political family. So at the national level, I think there are some obstacles to have Filipinization, although it is possible.
Thank you, Mas Jai. We'll take the second round of questions. This time will be quite short because we are going to have lunch break, yeah. Puncada, any other? I have questions from Mbak Hana. Yes, Mbak Hana, definitely. Okay then, we'll take two questions from Puncada and Mbak.
For Zayati. In Thailand, when we form the coalition government, we deal with before they form it. But in here, it seems like you deal with after you form it. Why? Because in Thailand, we need to negotiate to form the coalition because the government need the vote from the coalition party. So then that's why they form it before. But in here, since you already become the president, and why you need other political party to be in the cabinet? That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Puncada. Mbak Hana?
This is more to Farish, because I think one thing which is, people also say that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? So we don't need to reinvent the whole process of centuries of creating a state, because that take a long time. And so whatever we have from that sort of element of state that we can get from the colonial time can still be used. What we need to do is just making sure that the wheel now turn into tire, and that the tire is kind of nice, and then we can sort of like, it's more efficient and more effective. It's just that now if we see in the history, the term that we have for democracy is really short in comparison all of those sort of like centuries of kingship. So, but what we have now is the technology. I mean, how can we progress in a shorter period of time than this centuries of evolutions of states? So we can, okay, now we have a technology, we have also democratizations of knowledge as well. Before, only the elite or only those sort of monks and priests that have those knowledge. Now everybody, if they want, they can get and access those knowledge with the technology. So can we transform this progress that people are really thinking, not just in terms of interest, but also in terms of public goods, progress. So we have at least a positive note at the end of this. Thank you. There.
Thank you, Mbak Hana. I think Mas Jai first and then Mas Faris.
Should be short, right?
Yeah.
See, you have only 3 minutes time, right?
It's okay, Mas Jai.
Okay, Art, are you still called Art? Yeah, we were classmates before, long time ago. That consider we are not youth anymore, right? I think the answer to your question is a bit long, but the short answer is that in Indonesia, there are two kinds of coalitions. One is coalitions for presidential election. Two is coalitions for governing, for government, for making the government, or for governing, not for making the government. By law, the presidential nomination should be from political party or the combinations of separate political parties that meet the requirement of having at least 20% of the seats in the parliament. Because Indonesia is multi-party system, almost none of the political parties has the enough requirement. For now, only PDIP get that requirement. Others must make coalitions. Because the coalition is a must, it is a requirement. So you see the possibility of having coalition not willingly. Some parties unwillingly made coalition because no other choice, Mbak Hana. No other choice. If you don't make coalitions, you are in trouble, right? Politically and also possibly legally. So we have presidential election coalition, which is a must. And then if we have second round election, because Indonesian presidential election is using, what is it called? Majority runoff. Yeah. So if we have second round, which possibly will happen for 2024 election, then there will be another presidential election coalitions from first round to the second round. After that, president-elect is there, right? Now, the president has a choice. In governing, is he going to make coalitions or not? He has a choice. But because Indonesia is multi-party presidential system, usually no political party can win majority of the vote in the parliament, including the winner. For instance, Jokowi is the winner. His political party is also Jokowi is the current president. His political party is also the winner of the election. But PDIP only wins by around 19% of the votes, or around 22-23% of the seats in the parliament. In governing, the president must have approval, must cooperate with the parliament. So it is not enough for the president to govern only with his own political party or her own political party, because his proposal will be rejected by the parliament because he has no enough partisan power. To offset that problem, the president must make a coalition. Otherwise, he will be probably in deadlock with the parliament and cannot move his government. So the nature of coalitions in government in Indonesia is not to make the government. It is to make the president able to govern. He has a choice not to make a coalition. But using the concept of coalitional presidentialism around the world, most of the presidents in multi-party presidential system usually make coalitions.
Thank you, Mas Jai. Mas Faris?
Very quick answer. Yes, it is true that in terms of actual longevity, time, there's not been much time given to Southeast Asia to develop a democratic culture. But I don't think that explains everything, because remember, that's not a guarantee either. Look at Europe now, yeah, that has gone through hundreds of years of social democratization and all that, and still what, you have Brexit. Look at the wave of anti-immigration, the rise of identity politics. So time doesn't guarantee anything. You can have a democratic culture for 300 years. It can go away just like that, yeah? And it can go away democratically, the way the Nazis were voted into power. Don't ever forget that, right? So time is not the issue here. The issue is
when do you plant democracy? Yeah, if I want to plant rice, I don't go to the desert. Yeah, it doesn't matter how many times I try to plant rice in the desert, it's not going to grow, right? So I have to find fertile ground to plant rice. If you want to plant this, we have to ask, what are the political economic conditions that allow for democratization to be a meaningful discourse? Now, unfortunately, that's what we don't have. But it's not unique to Southeast Asia, it's happening around the world. That's why we see a democratic backsliding across the world today, because of the crisis of the global economy. And this becomes a generational crisis for younger people who are literally watching their future disappear before their eyes. And I think that's where we need to understand. I don't think time is against us in the sense of that Southeast Asia did not have enough time. We can actually, develop these ideas and propagate these ideas, but it appears when you have created a comfort zone where the conditions of possibility for this thing to emerge are there and can be sustained. Since you talk about public good, if your currency is collapsing on a daily basis or an hourly basis, public good goes out of the window. But when you're in a state of stability, then societies become more tolerant and accommodating. You can then begin to expand these spaces for accommodation and what have you, because the comfort zone is at least there. What I'm seeing a lot in Southeast Asia, especially the kind of identity politics that's articulated through democratic processes, is fear. It's fear. It's the fear of groups who feel that their slice of the pie is getting smaller. The fear of groups is an existential threat. It's often presented in existential terms. What's going to happen to us? And so the state then is this arena. We win the state to protect us. And so the general good is gone. And that's because I think the fragmentation that we have in many parts of Southeast Asia now is being exacerbated by political economic issues. And I think this is the challenge faced by all the governments in Southeast Asia today, particularly now that once again we are dragged into international contestation, what's happening in the South China Sea. This is going to impact on all of us. And say that turns out bad, the net effect of that will play out in the very weird forms of domestic politics that we'll see afterwards. How that might play out in terms of communal politics, ethnic politics, class politics. So I think that's the problem. Southeast Asia, unfortunately, has always been vulnerable to external variable factors. So whenever these things happen, whether it's a race riot in Europe, or whether it's a terrorist attack in the Middle East, we get impacted by it. And I think now we are seeing that. And especially, again, living in an interconnected world, we can't escape these things. I think that's where the challenge of governance lies.
Thank you, Mas Paris. With that note from Mas Paris, we end our first session. We will have lunch break. Please do stay tuned. Yeah, we will go back here at 1 p.m. But first, I will invite everyone, speakers, esteemed guests, as well as our promising students who have a photo session downstairs. Please join us, and then we'll go for lunch at the BI corner. Yeah. Thank you so much again.